All right, I'm ready. Good morning. Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, last night, if I look a little bit haggard or whatever, I was up till like midnight, like many of you, if you watched the debate and especially the coverage afterwards. But I have to ask right off the bat, was this a clown show or was it the first 2020 Democratic debate? I mean, I'm going to report. You decide. I mean, to me, it was a mixture of both. It was like combining those clowns above with the serious candidates we have below. But first, before we start out this morning, I want to do a couple of disclaimers. Of course, I got a smartphone here, and it's probably a lot smarter than me. But I don't speak Spanish, at least not enough to converse in it, to conversate. I probably speak just enough to get in trouble. But I've learned that with this phone, I'm okay. So I'm going to try to speak a little Spanish to you right now. Hey Siri, how do you say good morning in Spanish?
In Spanish, good morning, buenos dias.
Buenos dias. Hey Siri, how do you say pandering in Spanish?
In Spanish, pandering is proxenetismo.
Well, I can't even say that. Thank you, Siri. Last night, man, if you watch the debates, was it pandering? I got to ask, because I know I got a pretty large Hispanic following now, and I greatly appreciate you tuning in every day to JMT. And oh, by the way, if you're just tuning in, we're here now every day, Monday through Friday. At least that's our experiment, maybe with a couple of other things, but certainly Monday through Thursday. We're going to be live every day at 8 o'clock in the morning right here across great networks like Citizens for Trump, Deplorable Resistance, Media Measures, and others. And if, by the way, you'd like to be part of our growing family of networks, just contact me directly and we can certainly make that happen. Of course, probably one of the best ways to make sure you get our broadcast is to go directly to John Martin's Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. But last night, and I'll talk about my Hispanic audience out here, I'd like to ask you, was offensive to you? Because I was trying to put myself in the place of, a group, so to speak, some type of group think, which I'm not too keen on that. But of course, the Democratic Party is all about breaking you up into groups. I was thinking if I was Hispanic, I mean, I don't mind a little bit of Spanish to me and that kind of thing. But when they go out of their way to just go, look, I can speak Spanish. And then when they have, I guess the thing that really kind of upset me a little bit is asking questions to people in Spanish. Now, I know that they were on Telemundo or one of the Hispanic networks, and I really don't have an issue with that. But it just seemed to me, and I was wondering if you agree with that NBC went over the top, and the candidates to 2020, they talked this over. I mean, their various camps, they had to, but they went over the top in trying to appeal to Hispanics. And I just believe that you should appeal to Americans regardless of their national origin or whatever. That's just the way I am. But I just say, Buenos dias. I can't say pandering, but believe me, that's exactly what they were doing. Now, we're going to start today with an article from the New York Times. I looked at a bunch of different articles trying to figure out which one to best break down today. And the New York Times has one titled, 7 Takeaways from the First Democratic Debate. Now, I may or may not agree with all these, and I may have a few more, so let's see as we dig into the article. Night one of the first Democratic debate of the 2020 race is in the books. Of course, they got another one tonight. There was no standout moment for any of the 10 candidates. No one suffered real damage either. I don't really agree with that, and I'm going to expand on that as we go forward. While the NBC moderators tried to get the moderate and liberal Democrats to criticize each other, I'm not sure they really did. I mean, it was token at best. They were polite for the most part and stuck to their preferred issues and messages. I would agree with that. But, Castro, I think his name is Julian Castro. He was the HUD secretary under Obama. He did get on top of Beto a little bit. Beto, was it Paco or Beto? I get confused. It's Beto O'Rourke. If he just called himself what he really is, Robert Francis O'Rourke, the name his mama gave him, everything would be fine. But of course, that pandering is what it's all about. But Castro told basically Beto, and they were debating, if you will, even though it really wasn't much of a debate in that sense, but they were discussing, I should say, the proposition of having an open border, basically, and whether or not it should be criminal to violate the sovereignty of our border or not. And of course, they basically all agreed, and we'll get more in detail in a moment, that we should have open borders. Castro was talking a little bit about this particular aspect of the federal legislation, and he told Beto, he said, you need to do your homework before you come here, which, I guess was the harshest thing, the harshest debate between any of them. Back to the article, but there were some standout moments and takeaways about the Democratic race, and they're saying here that Castro won the night. I don't agree with that. I guess it depends on how would you say it again? Let's check it one more time, get this word right. Hey Siri, how do you say pandering in Spanish?
Okay, I found this on the web for how do you say pandering. Check it out.
Hey Siri, how do you say pandering in Spanish?
In Spanish, Spanish of pandering is hispanocono.
Well, there it is. Sounded different that time, probably because the operator error here. I probably asked the question differently, but that's probably a harder question than they got from NBC. But it really depends. They say in Castro, according to the New York Times here, won the debate. I would disagree with that, but I guess from their point, he became relevant in that sense, and I still don't think he's got any shot whatsoever to actually win the presidency. But he might be a solid VP choice, because of, once again, pandering. Mr. Castro, according to the New York Times, who has been middling performer since launching his campaign in January, middling is being kind, needed a big showing to break apart from the pack of 1% candidates. The media must have agreed on this because they went out of their way. I mean, you may or may not agree, but I don't see how you could take an honest assessment of that debate last night and not agree with it. The media, clearly NBC, was trying to showcase Castro. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Mr. Castro was assertive in key moments, but didn't appear desperate. Desperate. Did any of them appear desperate? I don't know. Despicable? Maybe. He took ownership of the discussion, and others on the stage, I like this part where they say others on the stage willingly agreed with them. Now, there's two ways to look at that. I think it's true. They willingly agreed. When I say that, I believe that pretty much all the Democratic 2020 candidates believe in an open border. At least they're saying they do. But the real thing is, they couldn't have possibly disagree with Castro, especially on that night in that setting. They would have been terrified. They were terrified to do it. There is no way any one of those candidates, I mean, Beto didn't really even disagree with the guy and still got slammed. You could not, in that moment, disagree if you wanted any shot at being the 2020 primary contender and not just torn apart by the media and the rest of the so-called contenders. You had to agree with Castro. So this idea that they willingly agreed to him, like I say, I think they're all behind open borders, but I also think they were terrified not to be last night. Castro delivered the night's lone winning canned applause line, and he said, and on January 20th, 2021, we will say adios to Donald Trump. Now that's cute, that sounds good, but if true, it won't be you that's saying adios. unless you're maybe, as I say, a VP candidate, because Mr. Castro, despite, quote, winning the night, according to the New York Times, you will not be the next president of the United States. I think I can firmly and assuredly say that. But of course, the New York Times is still all about Mr. Castro. The 44-year-old Texan who served as mayor of San Antonio and President Obama's housing secretary spoke little about his record in office. Well, what record? I mean, the guy really doesn't have a huge record of accomplishment. I mean, so what record was he supposed to talk about? And instead addressed the Democratic Party's aspiration as ending President Trump's immigration policies and reforming urban police departments. Reforming urban police departments. Now, de Blasio also talked about this, and we're going to get more specific into Comrade Bill in just a moment. But really, talk about reforming. What they really mean when it comes to reforming police officers is neutering them, making them basically irrelevant, making them like the police were out in California at Berkeley when they stood aside and just let people burn the university. I mean, that's what reforming police is all about in the Democratic Party. And as I said yesterday, and as I say, if you haven't seen our podcast, go back, check it out. The best way to do it is John Martin Talks Facebook page. Like it directly. Please like it and share it with others. You'll not only get my show, but you'll also get some memes I select for you so you can share them with others. Also commentary on different articles from time to time. And you're only going to get that at John Martin Talks Facebook page. So like it, share it, spread the word. I appreciate it very much. But as I said yesterday, you can't stand up for police and possibly be a legitimate contender for the 2020 presidential nomination of the Democratic Party. There's just no way. You cannot do it. President Trump, of course, he's all about it. And I am too. I tell you, one of the things, I don't think I've really talked about this, but one of the things I'll go out of my way to do, if I see a police officer or a first responder for that matter, and certainly someone in the military, I tell them every chance I get, thank you for your service. I greatly appreciate it. And they always tell me back, thank you for saying that, basically. So if you don't do that and you feel that way, then you should try it because it's very uplifting. Anyway, we'll move on. What happens next, talking about Mr. Castro's winning the night, and this could be true of any of the people last night that you think might be winning the night. What happens next is less clear. Mr. Castro's team must capitalize on his performance or risk falling back to the bottom of the pack. That's true. Your 15 minutes of fame, man, is pretty darn quick. So you better be prepared to go viral, to get out there, and I don't know. And this next point that they make, I totally agree with. But Thursday night's debate featuring heavyweights like, I don't know about the heavyweights, but like Joseph Biden Jr. and former Vice President and Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont may gobble up attention from the media and voters. And I agree with that statement 100%. I'm sure it will. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. I'll be up again tonight watching those debates, report back to you as soon as possible on those. But there's no question, and I don't know if they did this intentionally or it's just the way it is, but by having these two debates separated, which they had to do, they couldn't put 20 people on the stage, to have these debates separated with one night between them is really a total disservice to the people in the first night. Now, supposedly it was all chosen by random. I really don't know. But the people on the first night are naturally going to be overshadowed by the people of the second night, especially when you have Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden up there as the top two poll people. So that's just natural. I don't think there's any way, given the format, that they're going to be able to do that. Now, keep in mind that the next debate after these first two, you'll see potentially half the people there, not because they'll necessarily drop out of the race, but because of the Democratic Party, the national party's kind of rules and regulations. In this particular debate, in order to show up, the number one thing you had to have, I think, was $65,000 raised, at least that much raised by, I forgot exactly how many different individual people. Maybe it was I think it was $65,000 minimum, and it had to be raised by 65,000 different people. That's why some of them were online begging for $1 to get up there. And the next debate, the reason I say they're going to be less is the next debate, as I understand it, you're going to take double that, more than double, 100 and over 130,000 you have to have from 130,000 different donors. And there'll be quite a few at that stage last night and tonight that will definitely not meet that threshold. And they may do maybe some lawsuits against that. We'll see. But this next little part, I usually cut these out when I'm doing articles. And what I do is I break them down, I put them on paper, then I break them down and put my own little words in there. So I usually cut this part out, but I left it in there specifically. It says here, and this is from the New York Times, if you click on this little bit, if you were looking at the article in real time online, it says, read the full transcript from the first night of the Democratic primary debate. So you could click on this link. If you want to read the entire transcript of the 2-hour so-called debate last night, go to the New York Times article I'm referencing. Scroll down till you see that little clickbait stuff. Click on that, and I didn't do it, but you can read the entire transcript. Now, how sick do you have to be to actually say, well, tonight I'm going to sit down and read the entire transcript? I mean, it's pretty sick out there. I don't know if you saw this, a side note, but there was a Broadway production, I think a one night only, and it may be moving to places where they had these different actors literally reading a page or pages from the Mueller report. And they had like an hour and a half presentation live. You had to buy tickets to go see it, where these actors were reading from the Mueller report. Wow. I mean, you got to have no nightlife at all to do either or especially both, to go listen to actors read the Mueller report, or even sicker maybe, is in the confines of your room laying there and reading the entire transcript of last night's debate. Wow. So, going on with the article, the New York Times asks, who spoke the most? Well, they say Warren was center stage. I think Cory Booker had the actual minutes on air. We may talk about that in a minute. Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, as the president calls her, I call her Liawapa, the whitest woman in America, and I saw no reason to dispute that last night. By her own documentation, Warren was center stage, but only at the start. Ms. Warren got the first question, and it was right in her wheelhouse. In other words, she got a good softball question, the first question of the night, and pretty much all the questions were softball. There was a couple of times when they came back at him and said, well, I'll give you 10 seconds to actually answer the question, because there were multiple times when they would ask a question, and it's one thing to kind of get your message out, but they were totally ignoring the question, especially when it came to the economy, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But they were dodging that question and trying to get around Trump's economy every way they could. And how could you blame them? Because the facts support Donald Trump. But how could she justify the risk that this was the question, many plans might disrupt an economy that is doing well by several indicators? So even the NBC moderators admitted that the current economy is doing pretty well. And so they asked her, Elizabeth Warren, how will all her free stuff, basically, and all these programs that are going to cost trillions of dollars, how will they impact an economy that by most indicators is doing well? She answered it with a question. So basically she didn't answer it, but she answered it with a question that is central to her candidacy. Who is this economy really working for? She went on to say it's doing great for a thinner and thinner slice at the top. And this was consistent throughout the debate last night. They want to paint the economy, Trump's economy, they want to label it Trump's economy, the current state of the American economy, as only benefiting the rich and the powerful. Now, everything benefits the rich and the powerful for the most part. I hate to break it to you snowflakes out there, but being rich and powerful, it ain't a bad gig if you can get it, okay? So that's been from the beginning of time in any system of government. The rich and the powerful do better than the poor and the weak. That ain't going to change under any of these candidates here for 2020. If anything, there'll be less rich and powerful people and more poor and weak. That's going to be the result of it. So if that's what you're for, less rich, more poor, vote 2020 Democratic primary. Any of these people will make that prophecy come true, and tonight's guest as well. But the economy, I mean, come on, man. Trump's economy, just for the rich. I mean, they all struggle with that question. You know why? Because they're arguing against the facts. I mean, if you look at pretty much any indicator, most of them are at all-time highs. Unemployment is at like an all-time low. There are a couple of million, at least, more jobs right now than there are people seeking jobs. For the highest numbers, if not the highest we've ever had. 58% of all the new jobs, and they're being created daily, are going to women. So women should be for Trump. Black America and other, quote, groups of color are faring better than they ever have. Black unemployment is at an all-time low. So is Hispanic, by the way. Buenos dias to you again. That's about the limit of my Spanish. But Hispanics, why would they be for anybody but Donald Trump? Why would Black America be for anybody but Donald Trump? Because I can tell you right now, and I've said this before, but if I say it, of course, it bears repeating. Nothing gives you more freedom and liberty than a little jingling in your pocket. It don't matter of what color you are. So they struggled with trying to talk against the Trump's economy. They don't want to talk about it. They got to turn it to it's only benefiting the rich. And I just ask you out there, plain and question, are you better off now 2.5 years into Trump's presidency than you were before? I think the answer, if you're honest, is yes to the vast majority of people. Back to the article. Notably, no one on stage seemed eager to highlight contrasts with Ms. Warren, Mr. Booker, and Senator Amy Klobuchar. Both took passes when offered explicit opportunities. So when they had a chance to hit back at Warren, who was the leading poll number, the highest rated person on that stage last night, they wouldn't do it. They would not attack Elizabeth Warren. Now, perhaps that's smart because maybe it's too early for that. Maybe you need to wait till it whinnies down a little bit, like I tell you it's going to, like I said earlier in the show. But let me ask you this, if you watch that debate, were they being civil or just scared? I mean, I'm reporting you. I mean, I'm leaning on the scared side. I think they were scared to really raise their voices, scared to look like they might actually be attacking crazy progressive ideas, that type of thing. The one person that kind of did, well, a couple of them did, and we'll get into that in a minute, but the one that some people are saying was the shining star of the debate was this Tulsi Gabbard. She's the congresswoman from Hawaii, an Iraq and Afghanistan, I believe, veteran, certainly a veteran, and we appreciate her service. But it says here, in fact, by the 9:40 p.m. mark, Representative Tulsi Gabbard's Twitter account, talking about how this is about how Elizabeth Warren was so hands-off, they didn't attack her, which is this Twitter account of Tulsi Gabbard run by her sister during debate. So her sister tweeted this out. It's clear who MSNBC wants to be president. Elizabeth Warren. They're giving her more time than all the other candidates combined. Now, that was early on. That kind of equaled out. I really believe, if anything, the candidate that NBC was trying to highlight most was, as I said earlier, Castro. They were trying to highlight him the most. But this is about Tulsi Gabbard. Now, keep in mind that when I first looked after the debate, and I hadn't looked at it this morning, but they were doing a poll on the Drudge Report as to who won the debate. And the leading by a long shot was Tulsi Gabbard last night. Now, I don't know if that's because Drudge is considered most conservative site, although in fairness to Drudge, and I used him quite a bit actually, it really is a hodgepodge. I mean, they do a lot of Politico articles, Washington, you name it. If it's a big media source, they're on the Drudge Report. So to say that the Drudge Report itself is a conservative, I think they're somewhat neutral, but hey, that's just my opinion. But Tulsi Gabbard was leading, according to the Drudge, instant polling last night. And I can see why people say that. She did a great accounting of herself. She highlighted her military career. She highlighted some various things. She did a pretty good job of explaining some of her changes are evolving as Obama on certain issues. She did a good job. But make no mistake about it, she's got no shot at being the next president because she's running in a 2020 Democratic field, and they're just not going to allow anyone that is close to a moderate, let alone have a little bit of conservative credentials, which I think she could, certainly her military service. They're not going to allow that to happen. And she's not even going to be a contender for vice president, although I think she would make, obviously, considering the field, an excellent choice. She's got no shot at that either because they're not going to risk having someone that hardcore progressives will come out against. It's just not going to happen. And so the fact that she did very well, and I would agree she did very well, but she's not going anywhere. Her candidacy was over before it ever started. But while Ms. Warren was loomed largest on the economic matters, her center of gravity, according to the New York Times here, on discussion seemed to wane as the debate dragged on. And I would agree, she kind of took a back seat on some issues, and you'd have to watch it. I don't think it was a conscious decision on her part, just kind of the way it played out. But it seemed to wane as the debate dragged on, and the moderators spread time around all 10 candidates on stage. They did a pretty fair job from a timing aspect, I would say that. She went large periods talking about Elizabeth Warren without piping up as others jostled aggressively for time. Mr. Booker ended up speaking the most. But let me tell you about Cory Booker, man. I don't know if you watch this, I don't know if you caught this or not, but Cory Booker continuously talked about basically he needs to move. Perhaps he's running for president because 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is a better neighborhood than he's in currently. I mean, he continuously talked about how crappy, I'm using polite words today, how crappy his neighborhood is. So here's a guy who was mayor of his neighborhood, which is Newark, New Jersey, and he's talking about how crappy his neighborhood is in the crappy city that he crappily ran. I mean, so, no, he's talking about, I'm probably the only one up here that had somebody shot in my neighborhood just last night or night before, something like that. I mean, he went on and on about it. He's basically saying, please get me out of the city that I created. Please help me get to Pennsylvania Avenue. I mean, that was really his whole message. So Spartacus needs to get the hell out of New Jersey, But O'Rourke, Booker, Kohlbacher, the downside of storytelling. This is another takeaway from the New York Times. Let me take a little Trump break here. According to the Times, several candidates who needed big nights didn't deliver. And I wouldn't disagree with that. In part because their long-winded answers didn't play well in such a rat-a-tat debate format. I would agree with that. Some people, they do this story. Beto O'Rourke, as I like to call him, he's always answers every question with, oh, that reminds me of little Raphael I talked to at the border. I mean, he cannot just say, you know, boom, here's how I go. He's got to reference it to some people. I guess that's how he files stuff in his head, but I don't know. It didn't work well for him. Let me just tell you right now, O'Rourke's candidacy is over. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, he's got a large enough name profile that some lightning could strike. But as of this moment, Paco is no-mo. I mean, I can tell you that right now. But both O'Rourke and Mr. Booker, who are known for their eloquence and storytelling, that's what I was just talking about, had trouble breaking through the den. At times, the length of their answers obscured the points they were trying to make, if they were trying to make them at all, which I would question as well. Ms. Kohlbacher, now you may remember, she's the one that opened up her campaign announcement by standing in a complete blizzard while talking about climate change. We're warming up, and she was in a blizzard. Interesting, the optics they choose. But Kohlbacher, who is known to prepare audaciously for these types of appearances, struggled to hit her points concisely and was not a big factor. I wonder how you say audaciously in Spanish. Anyway, but this is at the Paco. I'm just telling you that one of the people that really did poorly last night was Beto. He's done, I'm telling you. Other candidates who did not make much of a ripple on Wednesday were Representative Tim Ryan, Ms. Gabbard. I would disagree with that. We talked about that a minute ago. And Governor Jay Inslee. Now think about this. You know, in this whole article, there was one guy that's not even mentioned one single time in the article, and that is John Delaney of Maryland. I mean, this is a guy who actually criticized some aspects of the left. He's not even criticized. He's not even mentioned, man. He really is not. But really and truly, what shot do any of these people have? Any of the ones that they're talking about that didn't perform that well? I don't see it. Let me just say, Mr. Ryan, according to the New York Times, was all but ignored during the first half of the debate before he started shoehorning himself into the conversation. So he did kind of force his way in. The as the article said earlier, I think, started that. But look, Tim Ryan, and I'm going to make sure that's it right, get his name right. Tim Ryan from Ohio. He's another one of those guys that his candidacy was done before he ever started. Keep in mind that Ryan had the audacity of hope, so to speak, to run against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House, or at least attempt to. Now, understand, this was not a progressive leftist attempt like some were trying against Pelosi. That would have been accepted. This was a moderate to conservative attempt to basically bring some type of moderation to the hardcore liberal left that the Democratic Party has become. So the fact that he would challenge Nancy from the right, if you want to call it that, meant that he's done. There is no way this guy can possibly win. It's not possible. Once he made the decision to do that, now I don't think he had much shot in, but he had zero shot after doing that, after challenging Nancy Pelosi from any semblance of the right. Ms. Gabbard, it says here, was strongest on her foreign policy answers, but hardly played a role otherwise. Now, as I say, Drudge had her winning. What they're talking about is she talked about military and about whether or not we should get out of Afghanistan, which is one of the questions. And I thought she handled herself pretty well, but she's got no shot because the fact that she actually served with distinction in the military, this just shows you how far the Democratic Party has sunk, how far they've gone to the left. The fact that Ms. Gabbard served our nation with distinguished honor in the military is actually a detriment to her getting the nomination. That alone is a detriment. There are certain things: respect for the military, respect for the police, support of any of that means you cannot win in the current state of the Democratic Party. And that is a sad, sorry statement, but it is a factual one. Mr. Inslee, who is like governor of Washington, state of Washington, I believe. Mr. Inslee, despite seizing on the segment about climate change, he's all about climate change, his signature issue and offers robust answers to other questions was largely overshadowed. Basically, if you watch what Mr. Inslee kept saying, he was essentially saying, I'm John Inslee. I'm John Inslee. And you might go, who? I mean, even after he talked, you still don't know who the heck the dude is. But basically, he was basically saying, I'm John Inslee, and I'm the only one up here that's done squat. I'm the only one done anything. The rest of these people are just talking, and I'm actually out there walking. I mean, that's what he basically said. Went over, as you can imagine, like a lead balloon. But trans rights, according to the Times, this is a major takeaway. Trans rights, not talking about transportation, by the way. We're talking about transgender, transvestite, gay rights. And they did a whole 3 or 4 paragraphs on this. I'm not covering all of that. But trans rights appeared in the debate for the first time. And what I've been telling you, and I didn't realize it would come up this quick, but I said a few weeks ago, you may remember, that I was waiting for, this whole abortion debate. And I've been telling you that the progressives will carry every single issue to the furthest extreme. Like Green New Deal, tear down all the buildings in New York, and let's ride a jackass. I mean, the extreme, that's what they're doing. Everything about it is extreme, everything. And abortion is no different. They pushed abortion from maybe safe, legal, and rare, like they kind of came out with, to making the baby comfortable after it's born before you decide to go ahead and kill it. And I told you that they were going to continue to be pushed. You wonder how much is going to be pushed outside the womb. Well, gay people are going to demand the right to abortion. People that can't even get pregnant, I'm talking about like gay men, transgender men that have whatever done to them, that can't get pregnant, are going to demand equal right. Well, I have a right to have an abortion too. I want to have every right that you have. I made that prediction, and some of you probably thought, man, that guy's just loony. Of course, I do talk to the fishes, This is my psychic sidekick. I usually show him out a little sooner. This is Billy Bob Bass. He stayed up late with me last night, so he ain't got much to say today. But he has a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. But he keeps me straight on the show, and I appreciate it. But he had a long night. But they finally said last night that gay people, and this was coming from Castro, he said that gay people, he said trans people have abortion rights too. And I'm like, wow, I don't get that. But Mr. Tucker was the first presidential debate candidate to reference protecting the rights of transgender people. Mr. Castro followed up shortly after that. So a gay right to abortion. I'm still kind of confused on this, so I'm going to refer to the smartphone here. Hey Siri, can a gay man have an abortion?
Okay, I found this on the web for can a gay man have an abortion? Check it out.
So they got a list of like articles and sites I could go to explain it. Siri can't even, thank you Siri by the way, Siri can't even explain to me a smartphone that's supposed to be like ruling our lives now, tell me how a gay man can have an abortion. But the Democratic Party could stand up for that right, for sure. The guy that the New York Times in Castro, they're saying, won the debate, he's actually advocating for abortion rights for gay people. I think being gay naturally means you're not going to have a child, right? I mean, natural selection means that if they put all gay people, if being gay is hardwired into you by God, and I'm not advocating, well, you get crazy, I'm not advocating for this, but if you put all gay people on an island and said, oh, repopulate, if they true, it's over in one generation, right? So, and I'm not advocating for that, I'm just pointing out how crazy the left has come, because they're actually advocating for gay people to have an abortion, which you heard that predicted right here on JMT first. That's why you need to tune into shows like this. Because not only am I seriously entertaining, I'm right. Biden and Sanders, they weren't in a debate, but according to this article, it says Biden and Sanders top of the polls, but they did not loom over the debate. They will tonight, I'm sure, because they'll probably not, that'll be all they talk about. That was not a given going Wednesday night's debate, as Thursday night's debate could be rough when Mr. Biden and Mr. Sanders appear on stage together. What'll probably be rough is how do you get these two rickety old white dudes that are not supposed to be relevant in the persona non grata, right, in the modern Democratic Party. They're leading in the polls. Get them on stage, maybe hold on like that, and then watch your back. I mean, one thing about it, when it comes to Creepy Joe, you got to watch your back. When it comes to Bernie, you got to watch your pocketbook, because they're both after that. But Mr. Biden and Sanders put together. Still, the fact that no one called out those two leading candidates in absentia, so no one even mentioned their name, other than Elizabeth Warren was asked about supporting Bernie's free health care for all, and she basically said she had signed off on it. Even Ms. Warren noted her general agreement with Mr. Sanders on health care indicates that the Democrats are still reluctant to engage with each other more forcefully. Now, that's probably true. But I say it's not reluctant. If you're scared, say you're scared, man. Just think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If you watched that debate last night, and I don't know about tonight till I watch it, but can you name me one person at 10 who can honestly say, I don't agree or disagree with their politics? You're just honest with yourself, especially you snowflakes out there. Can you really see that any of those 10 are really presidential material? Can you really see them defending the United States of America against both enemies, both foreign and domestic? Because I just can't. In mind now, you could be for all these different free stuff, and I get it. Free is good until you have to pay for it, but free is good. But the primary job of the President of the United States is to defend this country, to stand up for this nation, and to protect it from enemies, both foreign and domestic. It's actually in the oath, by the way. Now, I don't see any of these people being able to stand up to Iran. I see them going, here's the check Ayatollah. I swear, let me write you a check. I mean, that's the best I think they could do. There's not a one of them that could hold the jockstrap of the current commander-in-chief, Donald Trump. Now, there may be a few up there that'd like to, but there ain't none that could actually hold it. De Blasio, we got to talk about Comrade Bill, because I actually think, now hold on before you just freak out when I say this, I actually think de Blasio won that debate last night. And the reason is because when you look at a debate, is who had the most to gain versus who had the most to lose. De Blasio had zippo to lose because most people are that know, not too many people really know that much about Mayor Bill. You know, he left there last night. Everyone who watched the debate knows who he is. Now, I don't agree with much of anything he said. Probably nothing. Matter of fact, I probably vehemently disagree with it. But he articulated it very well. Now, keep in mind, he's not trying to get my vote. He might as well not, because if you voted for Donald Trump, you're not going to vote for Bill de Blasio. If you voted for Donald Trump, I doubt you're going to vote for any of those people up on the stage right there. So he's not appealing to people, MAGA hat wearers, I can tell you that. He's appealing to the hardcore progressives that are going to determine who wins the primary. They might not determine who the president is, but they are going to play the main role. The hardcore progressive left is going to play the main role in who wins the primary. And that is who that gentleman right there was appealing to. And I think he did a very good job of showing just how leftist he is, period. And so in that sense, I think de Blasio actually won the debate. Now, my understanding is the actual campaigning that his camp is doing is lousy. As far as getting his attention out there, I expect his poll numbers to go up significantly after last night. But let's see what the New York Times has to say about it. De Blasio has a respectfully strong showing, so they kind of agree with me. Mayor Bill de Blasio exceeded the very low expectations that greeted him in the debate, bringing an energy, and I love this part, bringing an energy honed in the New York City political culture. So here you have the New York Times giving de Blasio credit for being kind of a scrapper New Yorker guy. And I agree with that, by the way. But they give zero credit. In fact, it's considered a detriment when Donald Trump does the same thing. Now, both of these men, and I'm not comparing them in a sense that they have any comparison politically, but Donald Trump is a scrappy street fighter kind of guy from New York. Believe me, to rise up in New York, and when I say street fighter, I don't mean you're kung fu fighting everybody. It's a war of words for the most part in the Big Apple. And I lived up there for over 4 years in the mid 80s. And I can tell you that New York people are some of the toughest people. I mean, go look at people who have won medals of valor and stuff in World War II and other services. New Yorkers are tough, man. I tell you, they are. And Donald Trump is as tough as they come. When he's a counterpuncher, when you hit him once, you better bring your lunch bucket. He's going twice and 3 times as hard. De Blasio has some of those same characteristics. That's just part of growing up there. But the New York Times is giving him kudos, de Blasio, for having this toughness of a New Yorker. But for Donald Trump, he's just mean, nasty, rotten, racist, everything but a child of God, for basically doing the same thing. And I just wanted to point out that because let me tell you, and I've said this before, but if I say it, it bears repeating, this idea that there's a double standard, if you hadn't tuned into my show, this may be the first time you've heard this, you need to listen to this carefully. There is no double standard. There's not a double standard. There is one standard for conservatives. And if they deviate from that in any way, they are hammered, slammed, whatever. So there's a standard for conservatives. For progressives like de Blasio, there is no standard. Say or do anything they want, and the media will just gobble it up, spit it out, and make you look like a saint. You know, so there is only one standard, and there's one for conservatives, zero for the left. No standard whatsoever. Anything goes. And this thing about the street fighter New Yorker is an example of that. Mr. de Blasio was the first candidate to interrupt people, cutting off, and he did. He cut off O'Rourke when the former congressman, and I like this part, when the former congressman defended, talking about Paco O'Rourke, maintaining the private insurance industry, his health care proposal. Blasio spouted out. Are you defending private insurance? The mayor asked. And yeah, I would ask was it Billy Bob told me I got the name wrong. Beethoven. It's Robert Francis. But anyway, wow, my notes went off for some reason. Let me back it up. I'm sorry, a little technical glitch here. We got to get it right. I apologize, Billy Bob. You're not supposed to let that happen to me. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So bear with me one moment. I had a by the way, NBC had quite a few, didn't they? They had that open mic situation, and I'd like to hear what the actual transcript of that open mic, if anybody said anything about it. But anyway, I got it straight now. So I would ask all of them, like, yeah, why would you defend public health insurance? Because make no mistake about it, they are all for government-run health care. Health care is going to be a big issue. It's why they probably dominated the debate last night, that and immigration. But because the powers that be, the media, the Democrats do realize that is one issue where President Trump might actually be vulnerable on. Not necessarily his fault, but health care is a mess in this country right now. But make no mistake about it, they are all for government health care. The only difference between any of these hardcore leftists, which all of them are, by the way, is how do we get to government health care? How quickly can we get there? They all are for it. They want government to control everything, especially health care. So don't be confused by that. So we're going to move on. Let me check my time. We got a few minutes left. Quickly, there's a story out of the AP, and they really don't say as much as the title, but I picked up on a little bit of this. 10 Democrats rail against, says Democrats rail against economy for the rich in the first debate. 10 Democrats railed against the national economy and Republican administration they argued exist only for the rich as presidential candidates debated on stage. So they're basically saying here that they were soaking the rich, that they were all about bashing it, because the rich people, by the way, are the problem. If we could just get rid of them or suck dry, we'd be better off. What, for like a day, if that? But they're trying to argue, as I said earlier, against the facts. Good luck with that. There was nothing new about that. But here, I want to read you this one paragraph, and then we'll move on to another story. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, more than anyone else, stood out on this particular issue about soaking the rich on her own times in calling for fundamental change across the nation's economy and government to address widening gap between the rich and the middle class. Keep in mind that she is for a 70% tax rate on what she calls wealthy people. And the amount of money you got to have be wealthy, according to them, seems to shrink every day. So she's, what is it, MAGA? I don't see her wearing a MAGA hat over that those feathers in her cap. It's MAGA what? I mean, making America great again. They want to make America, you know what they really want to do? Because all these different candidates, and they spoke about the wealthy, the economy working for the wealthy versus the poor. And I said this kind of early in the show, but I want to make sure you understand this. What they're trying to do is eliminate the poor. Eliminate the rich and make everyone poor and dependent upon government. Because that is the ultimate dream of these progressive leftists, is to make as many people as possible dependent upon government. Then they're locked in forever. That's what they're trying to do. So be careful about that. All right, when the time we have left, I want to read to you, this comes from USA Today. I want to read to you some of the Republicans' response to what happened last night, certainly the president. Disconnected from reality. This is USA Today. Donald Trump, other Republicans slammed Democratic debate. According to the USA Today, they said that, they're talking about President Trump, he couldn't resist, because President Trump said he was going to kind of stay out of it. One time he said he was going to do basically play-by-play Twitter, then he kind of backed off on that, and then he kind of got, in the middle of it a little bit. He tweeted prior to the debates, and he tweeted after the debates. During the debate, keep in mind, he was flying on Air Force One, which most of these people never see the inside of, to Japan for the G20 summit over there. But he tweeted out during the debates, boring. One word, boring. And that put the left on fire. President Donald Trump suggested Wednesday he wouldn't be live tweeting the Democratic presidential debate in Miami. He was on Air Force One en route to Japan and off to save the world. See, President Trump says these kind of things. The media takes it so literally. They just freak out. They got Trump derangement syndrome. Donald Trump saved the world. Now, that's, as I've said many times, Donald Trump reminds me of P.T. Barnum, and I'm not knocking him for this. Donald Trump is a showman. He is. It's part of his persona, and those of us that get it actually love him for it. Does he overuse it from time to time? Probably so. But in general, we love Donald Trump and we know what he's talking about. The media just doesn't get it, or they don't want to get it, but they make it sound like when he says, I'm out to save the world, it's like, he's going to be like, what was it, Mighty Mouse? Mighty Mouse goes, here I come to save the day. I mean, we know what he's talking about, man. The whole email thing, I hope the Russians get Hillary's email. It was a joke. Get over it, man. But roughly half an hour into the debate, Trump tweeted out his snarky, all caps, one-word review. Snarky. Boring. He just summed up the debate. It was boring. If you were trying to, it depends on how you look at it. And I certainly get his perspective. It wasn't boring to me because I was looking forward mostly to reporting it to you. Was it a clown show? Or was it a debate? I report, you decide. You know probably which way I'm leaning. But I think that the Democrats exposed who they actually are. And if you are for a hardcore leftist form of government, then hey, you might find one or two in that bunch to support. But, if not, we'll go with Trump. Trump's decision to weigh in on the debate ran counter to advice of many Republicans. I bet it did. Probably people he hasn't actually hired, who suggested he should resist the temptation to respond as 10 Democratic hopefuls battle each other and quarter their party's liberal base. Well, like I say, probably these so-called Republican experts are not Trump supporters to start with, and they're not on his payroll. Much of these never-Trumpers, they're just not on his payroll. Keep in mind, Mitt Romney, King Swamp Rat, tried to get, now that he's against Trump again, he actually applied for a job with Trump. I think Trump trotted him out there during the before he got sworn in during the transition period, just so he could jab him one more time. But I just say, hey, let Trump be Trump. Now, is he always the best all the time? No, he's imperfect, but we know who Donald Trump is, was, and we hope to be. This idea that we unwittingly, that was a word they tossed out for a while, it didn't work too well, that somehow the MAGA hat wearers didn't know who Donald Trump really was. Bullshit. We knew exactly who Donald Trump was. That's why we him, not because he's a perfect human being, because he knows where the swamp rats live and knows how to drain that dadgum swamp. That's why we elected Donald Trump. We knew he was, in my opinion, but it's an opinionated fact, he's the perfect person at the right time. Person at the right time. But just let Trump be Trump, man. All these people trying to control him, forget that. But staying on the sidelines, according to this article, USA Today, isn't Trump's style. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Just a few minutes after less than favorable review of the debate, Trump was at it again, this time slamming the debate host NBC for technical glitch that stopped the program for a few minutes. It was terrible. It was extremely distracting. They had apparently they shift moderators midway through the debate, which has kind of become a common theme right now on debates over the last few years. But apparently the people that left the moderating podium still had hot mics, and you could hear them talking off stage. Now, I'd like to hear what they actually said. You couldn't really make it out, but if someone would probably do it, they might have said, hey, you believe these fools? I'm not saying they said that, but it wouldn't shock me. And then, of course, I don't mention this in the article, but I was watching it, and several times the screen literally blacked out. And I thought, at first it was on my end, something to do with my internet or something. But actually, no, it was NBC's coverage. Literally, the screen went dark at least 3, maybe 4 or 5 times during the debate. It was really quick, but it happened. So, that is not good, right? But other Republicans also offered their take on the debate. Trump's campaign manager, Brad Parscale, I've actually met the gentleman, a running commentary on Twitter. He slammed the Democratic candidates as hypocrites. Imagine that. He suggested the debates are great because the American people can now see how far left the candidates are. And that is true. and I've been saying this all along, if you'll just listen to what they're saying and take these progressives at their word, they have been so emboldened, they're so sickened with Trump derangement syndrome that they will tell you exactly where they want to take this country. And to me, it's frightening, but they will tell you. So just pay attention, come at their word. This is one thing he said that I don't particularly agree with, is the campaign manager of Mr. Trump. He said, if these policies were implemented, millions of foreigners, this is the part I don't agree with, would flood our system and overwhelm public services. They are disconnected, talking about the 2020 people, from reality. I do agree with that. But the only thing I have a little bit of quirk is his term foreigners. They're illegal. What he's really talking about is illegal aliens. And yes, we need to stop that. Foreigners per se, no. But illegal aliens, which are foreigners, I realize that. Maybe it's just my pet peeve on this. I like calling it what it is. It's not a knock on them, it's just a fact. If they're illegal aliens, let's call them illegal aliens. That's what they are. Check my time. Almost out of time. Got about 5 minutes left. Trump's campaign issued a statement after the debate saying it was the best argument for President Trump's re-election and should really be counted as an in-kind contribution. Well, to channel my Larry the Cable Guy, that's funny. I don't care who you are. That is funny that it should be counted as an in-kind contribution. I cannot argue with that. Campaign spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany said the Democrats proposed a radical government takeover of American society that would demolish the American dream so many are gaining access to under Trump. By the people, for the people. That's what it's supposed to be, not according to the Democrats. I like this one here where Lindsey Graham tweeted this. After tonight's hashtag Democratic debate, that whole Trump third term is looking better and better. So, because Donald Trump, jokingly, it's a joke, okay? He actually talked about how his supporters basically might not let him leave after a second. And of course, the media just goes batshit crazy out of it, to the point that this article has to point out, think they have to, the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution explicitly states that no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. As if we didn't know that, those of us who support Trump. Now, there probably are some pretty ignorant people, because there are people, for instance, who are supporting Impeach 45 because they think if Trump gets impeached and removed from office, that Hillary will then be the president. Which ain't true. Donald Trump is still your president, and after last night's debate, and tonight's probably too, will likely be for a good long time. I don't know about a third term. But basically, we got a choice, ladies and gentlemen. It really comes down to this. And this is not just about President Trump. If you want to be the country that we are, now we're not perfect, but if you believe in American exceptionalism, if you believe that we should be ruled by a constitution and the rule of law that protects the right of the individuals, that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit, not the guarantee of happiness, if that's the country you want us to continue to be, you can't vote for any of these 10 that are up there last night, and I'm pretty sure any of the 10 that'll be up there tonight. Your only real choice is Donald J. Trump. Now, there are people like me that think that's a great choice, but there are people that may think they don't like the man. But I'm just telling you flat out, at the end of the day, in the 2020 presidential election, we're going to have a choice between the hardest core leftist person that's ever run for president. Because whoever out of this 20 that is going to be the Democratic nominee, make no mistake, they're going to be the hardest core leftist candidate by a major party in the history of the country, versus someone who is willing to stand up, put America first, want us to be ruled under the Constitution. That is Donald Trump. That, at the end of the day, is going to be your choice. We're going to keep reporting on this. We'll follow the debate tonight, report it on you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please like and spread our show as far and wide. Go directly to John Martin Talks, like it, and share it with others. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.